Hey, Governor.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Governor. This is Vineet Iyengar, Executive Director for Broadband and Connectivity. And we've got a full house today, which speaks to the passion and alignment that everyone has for broadband, but also thanks to all of the folks on this call for helping ourselves and the governor and the people really push and make a tremendous amount of progress when it comes to addressing issues around broadband. I'm going to dispense with doing a roll call because we've got a really robust crowd today, which includes a number of secretaries, commissioners, people that are stakeholders in the BEL Commission, and people that are really touching directly broadband. And with that, I want to hand the conversation over to Governor Edwards to say a few words.
Thank you, Vineet, and good morning. It's good to see so many of my friends. If you see me looking around, I'm just trying to look at all of you individually, and I thank you so much for your participation in the commission and then your presence in this meeting today. And Vineet, thank you for the work that you've been doing, and I am excited about what this commission is doing. I think it's critically important. And on top of that, it has the best name in the history of commissions. I like the BEL Commission, BEL, 1L. And somebody was pretty ingenious, at least in my mind, for coming up with that. But seriously, the work that you all are doing as commission members is incredibly important for our state. And obviously the commission was formed in advance of COVID, but boy, the last 15 months has proven just how critically it is that everyone in Louisiana have access to real high-speed, affordable broadband. And that's why it is the Broadband for Everyone in Louisiana Commission. And I want to thank you all for the work you're doing. I know that there's a lot of challenges, but there's also more opportunity now than we have ever had because of ARP funding, because of other initiatives that the federal government's taking, because of the interest in Louisiana, and in the future, we know that there will continue to be an emphasis on this, because whether you're talking to Republicans or Democrats, whether you're talking to senators or members of the House of Representatives in Washington, I think just about everybody's definition of infrastructure includes broadband now. And so what they're going to argue about different things related to infrastructure, but this is not one of them. But just think about this past year. If you wanted to do business as robustly as possible, if you wanted to stay in contact with family and friends, and if you wanted to educate kids, and not just kids, higher education, once the stay-at-home order went in and vulnerable people were advised not to be in crowds and so forth, the internet was absolutely essential. And the fact that we have a digital divide in Louisiana was exposed and made more painful than it had ever been before. And a lot of good work was done in a hurry, but there's only so much you can do in a hurry. So, for example, with my discretionary funding under the CARES Act for education, the vast majority of that went to purchase devices, because as it turns out, you have to have not just the internet connection, but you also have to have a device. And we had lots of students around the state who just didn't have them in schools and school districts and that sort of stuff. But the pandemic absolutely brought to light what the lack of adequate broadband in our communities can do. Education, but also agriculture, healthcare. I've been promoting telehealth for a long time. Just Friday before last, I went home to Tangipahoa Parish to illustrate what we can do with telehealth in terms of our K through 12 schools, so that parents don't have to miss work, and kids from right there in the nurse's office can actually be seen by a physician, potentially getting prescriptions written and all that sort of stuff. But none of that happens without broadband. And then generally speaking, it's essential for our quality of life. And it's more important nowhere than in rural Louisiana. And rural revitalization is a key goal of ours, and it has been for a long time. And one of the things we have to stop is the migration away from rural areas where they believe that there's more opportunity in urban areas. And one of the key things there is the difference in the availability of the internet. So if the internet is widely available across Louisiana, including and most especially in today's unserved areas, then we're all going to win. And in order to do this, we've created a broadband office within the Division of Administration, and it will act as the focal point to coordinate federal, state, and local efforts to effectively and efficiently ensure broadband for everyone in our state. And of course, Vineeth is going to head that up. You all know Vineeth now. Last year, the FCC awarded 13 providers more than $340 million to provide high-speed internet to over 175,000 homes and businesses over the next several years. And I'm excited about meeting with them in person, hopefully in the very near future, to understand what their plans are for achieving this and how we integrate that into our overall approach. Because while we have more money than we've ever had for broadband investments, we don't have enough to do this for everyone at once, and we need to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts, but that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. Partner with the Delta Regional Authority, and I see Leslie Durham on the call. She has been tremendous, but they launched a best practice crowdsourced
He also told me he was gonna.
a broadband mapping service to identify the severity of the divide, but also somebody needs to mute, if you don't mind. Somebody is not muted up there. But that mapping service is going to identify the severity of the digital divide, but also provide information to guide us in the allocation of resources. And I think she's arranged a demonstration of that platform for you all. And I think you're going to be interested in seeing that. We're working on a bill right now with Representative Desautel in the House of Representatives. It's HB 648. It has gotten out of the Senate committee. It'll be on the Senate floor soon. We're working through, I think, what will hopefully be a final set of amendments to that bill that creates the first statewide grant program to address broadband access issues. And the goal here, and I would hope everyone agrees with this and will support the goal, is to create a structure that doesn't just facilitate the investment of the American Rescue Plan dollars, but it's a structure that's going to be flexible enough to handle additional funding opportunities that could come, for example, through a federal infrastructure package or a specific broadband only funding opportunity that may come in the future. So we need it to, certainly in the short term, to do what we need to do with the American Rescue Plan funds, $180 million of which are available this year for broadband. And I think we're going to split that up over 2 years, but that's available now. But also it should be a vehicle for us to continue to address broadband access going forward beyond the American Rescue Plan. We've done statewide outreach to promote the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program to sign up eligible families for the FCC broadband discount. And so while there's more activity going on right now than ever before, while there's more funding than we've ever had before for this, it is not sufficient yet to do everything that we need to do. So we have to be very smart, we have to be efficient, and we have to create a program that we can duplicate and replicate going forward so that we can do this all over the state of Louisiana. But access, affordability, and digital literacy are going to be critically important for our success. So please understand, I am grateful for your efforts so far. I'm excited about what I know that we can accomplish together going forward. And I'm going to follow up with Vineeth and really all of you to figure out what our most critical next steps are going to be. Lastly, I talked about COVID exposing the digital divide and really highlighting how many unserved and underserved areas we have in Louisiana. So before I go, I just want to remind everybody that while we're doing much better in COVID, the pandemic is still with us. We still have people getting sick every day, going to the hospital every day, and dying every day. But we now have 3 safe and effective vaccines. So please do what you can to be vaccinated yourself, but be an ambassador for the vaccination program within your family, within your workplace, within your church, and so forth. There are over 1,500 locations today in our state where people can receive a vaccine. And you can go to vaccines.gov, put in your zip code. It'll tell you where all the nearest locations are, give you phone numbers and all that sort of stuff. Anybody with a question and they want to talk to a medical professional or they want help scheduling a vaccine, or if you know somebody who's homebound and we need to get somebody out to their home, we can schedule those things too if you just call 855-453-0774. So with that, I'm gonna wrap up and give you all back the meeting. But Vineeth, thank you so much for your work. I do hope that within the next day or two, you're going to see the Senate complete work on the House bill that I mentioned, and that we will have that bill up here for my signature soon. You always want, if it's possible, to reach a compromise that everybody can be happy with. I hope that's possible here. But if not, we're going to have to move forward. But we are trying very, very hard to accommodate everyone's objectives here and so forth. But we're going to have to get that bill moving very soon. Thank you all very much. And Vineeth, did I miss anything? Is there something else that you need?
No, thank you, Governor. Greatly appreciate your time. Just as I'm going to do a quick audible because we do have a special guest coming in at 10:30. Governor, it's the interim chair of the FCC, Jessica Rosenworcel, and Mayor Perkins and I had dinner from Shreveport last week to talk about broadband, some of the challenges that they have, and Mayor Perkins was kind enough to get the interim chair to say a few words at 10:30 to talk about what they're doing at the federal level. Which is going to be really interesting and really good. So we're going to do a little bit of an audible in the program, and I think she's going to be chiming in a few minutes. So thank you, Governor, for your words and for your you being the tip of the spear for everything broadband and for everything BEL related.
That's right. Thank you, Vineeth, and God bless everybody.
Thank you. So with that. What I wanted to do before the interim commissioner for the FCC comes, which we're again grateful to Mayor Perkins and Keith Hansen and the folks in Shreveport for facilitating to say a few words so that they could talk about their plans going forward. What I wanted to do was piggyback off what the governor said and sort of set the framework in terms of understanding the challenges that are ahead of us when it comes to accessibility, affordability, and digital literacy. And so what I've done is prepared a couple of slides that some of you guys I think have probably seen when I've been on the road. And let me just do a quick screen share of the presentation. And what I'm going to do right now is just go over a couple of slides over the next couple of minutes, and feel free to ask me questions. But if you start to look at the totality of the broadband problem in Louisiana, you can really bucket the challenges really in 3 key areas. First is access, the second is affordability, and the third is digital literacy. If you start to look at the access issue, we have over 450,000 households in Louisiana, representing almost 1.1, 1.2 million Louisianians that lack access to how the FCC defines broadband today, which is 25 down and 3 up. And so that's how the FCC has adopted those speeds for this year. That may change as we move forward and as there becomes an ever increasing importance on work from home and telehealth and so on and so forth. If you look at the number of percentage of folks that lack the affordability piece to a low-cost internet plan, 43.6% is a big problem. So the FCC's Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, while temporary, really provided an injection to the community that's going to benefit for those that really are having issues when it comes to creating and really affording broadband on a longer term basis. And then digital literacy. It's not just good enough to provide the affordability piece, the accessibility piece, but if you start to look at the challenges, especially among our adults when it comes to literacy, we have 744,000 adults in the state of Louisiana that really lack the utilization skills to understand what to do with a telehealth visit or with a visit in terms of paying bills online or an education visit. So that becomes an ever increasing problem in the state of Louisiana. Now, despite that, and based on conversations I'm having with a number of my other colleagues in other states, conversations I'm sure all of you guys are having, anecdotally, we're not behind, right? If you start to look at gigabit infrastructure, which is where we want to go, if you start to look at rankings that combine wired low price plans, broadband access, and speed, we either rank 18 in gigabit infrastructure based on US News or 33. So while we're not sort of top of the list, we're not the bottom of the list. We're sort of in the middle. And so we have ample rooms to grow. And as the governor said, I think what's really important is that we use the grant program as the accelerant and as a foundation for what we think is going to come down the pipeline through the infrastructure bill to really help build and invest in those highways. Why is this important and what's the vision for Louisiana? The vision really that the governor has and that we all have is to eliminate and reduce that digital divide substantially by 2029. So we effectively have 7.5 years to doing so. And why is it important? 4 times multiplier in terms of every dollar that's invested from an infrastructure perspective. Of course, it's no longer 10 different federal pots of money. It's actually 26 different federal pots of money. So financial resources as a gating issue when it comes to addressing access and addressing affordability is not going to be as much or a big of a problem. We expect to receive, if you were to take a look at the Republican counter on the infrastructure bill, potentially an additional $1.2 billion over an 8-year period. And we talk about speed tests. The FCC historically has a best practice when it comes to speed tests and crowdsource. So we've got the folks from GEO Partners who will talk a little bit about the speed tests that they've performed in Louisiana thus far in partnership with the DRA. And this is the project that the governor had mentioned that he had worked with Leslie Dorn on and continues to. We talked a little bit about RDOF, right? So the Rural Digital Opportunities Fund, $342 million to be invested in over 6 years to impact 175,000 residents. This is what this map looks like if you haven't seen. 13 different providers. They have an obligated spend to the FCC or obligation to the FCC over a 10-year period to build out starting in year 3, 40% of what they have committed to the FCC, and then progressively 40, 60, 80, and 100. So the goals are to build as many of these households as possible over the next several years. One of the things that the governor and I have a keen interest in doing is bringing together the RDOF winners, these 13 companies, either in late June or mid-July, to understand very tactically what their game plans are and what we can frankly do to help expedite their bills, right? And so one of the things that we want to understand is from a local policymaking perspective, in places where I'm visiting, whether it's small towns, villages, parishes, understanding what we need to do to help really accelerate builds from a policymaking perspective so we can move faster to providing broadband speeds to those households is going to be something that we're keenly interested in learning from all of you guys and what we can do together to help address some of those issues. Now, with regards to our office, I may have or may have not met with all of you, but just to give you a little bit of my background, I grew up in Baton Rouge, left in '97, and then came back a couple of years ago to head economic development for the city of Baton Rouge and for Mayor Broome. And one of the things that we were very successful in doing in Baton Rouge over the last couple of years was really tackle some really difficult challenges, but leveraging public-private partnerships. So that's going to be a similar theme that we're going to sort of leverage and use and construct when it comes to addressing issues around access, affordability, and digital literacy. With respect to our office, you know, this office was effectively created a couple of months ago. My first day on the job was March 29th. And one of the things that I'm beginning to hear often, especially among the parish leaders, is I've got a passion, I want to get it done when it comes to addressing broadband, but how do I get started? And so we're going to start to create a broadband toolkit, really a 101 document for all parish community and business leaders on how to effectively get started, but really also helping to bridge that knowledge gap in terms of what isn't broadband, why is it important, and again, how can you get started? The second is to continue to push that crowdsourced effort that we're going to use as a data point in terms of the Gumbo grant program that's being authored by Rep. Desitel. And we're going to continue to work with the rep. I think we're targeting that the bill will be heard on the Senate floor tomorrow. And then hopefully we resolve whatever we need to resolve tomorrow before concurrence in the House floor next week, and then up for the signature to the governor. So the other sort of threshold and other activities of our office continue to proactively engage with RDOF participants, as I mentioned, to really help them understand their tactical road market to addressing some of the broadband issues, to help faster and increase deployment, identify all those pots of money, develop the funding matrix. That's another big challenge, especially with parishes, towns getting money from the American Rescue Plan, focus on water, sewer, broadband, of which broadband, some of that money could be used for infrastructure, for digital literacy and affordability. So then the idea is, how do we come up with that funding matrix that could include money from the schools, money from the parishes, money from the private sector, and then money from our grant program to really stretch out those financial resources. Again, just some high-level initiatives, 180 million from the remote access projects, which really is the 180 million that's coming from the American Rescue Plan, focused on depreciable assets, some middle mile, but really focused on last mile connectivity. And the timeline is aggressive because we have to commit to not only commit that money, but also spend that money by the end of 2024. Broadband regional assistance. So through the DRA and through the work that Leslie's been at the tip of the spear, they're working with the planning development districts to gather local and regional input, surveys, needs, service gaps, and maybe we'll have Leslie talk about that for a few minutes after this call. And then additional broadband initiatives. We do have proposed legislation, which is really HB 465, which is Representative Mike Johnson's 4.9 gigahertz legislation. Continued, again, this broadband grant funding program. And again, what we want to do effectively is continue to stress the importance of broadband in healthcare, education, and agriculture. And I think we're working on some really interesting bespoke solutions, really tailored solutions in addressing both healthcare, education, and agriculture. And so if you start to take a look at, even in the healthcare space, you know, Medicaid data, folks that are receiving assistance from a variety of different governmental programs, you start to overlay the crowdsourced data, median household income data, then you can start to develop patterns on where we need to start to inject resources to address both the affordability and accessibility. And a couple of things from a next step perspective. Again, May 12th was we pushed out a couple of weeks ago, which I'm sure you guys have all pushed out, the FCC Affordable Emergency Benefit Program, EBB program. July 1st is the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which is going to focus on helping households get the reimbursements for devices, hotspots. August 17th is the NTIA Broadband Infrastructure Grant Program. And so this coming week, actually next week, June 9th, I'm going to be on a webinar to understand the guidelines and rules behind the Broadband Infrastructure Grant Program, which is going to provide grants between $5 million and $30 million to address the infrastructure gap that exists in broadband access. Again, the speed test, we want to get as close to maybe 100,000 households to participate by the end of fall this year, which will provide us with a great snapshot. And some of the advice that we're giving to local leaders as I travel. In fact, tonight I'm going to Sunset, Louisiana, which is near Karen Crow, and then on Friday to Lake Charles, and the next week to Leesville, is have patience. And partly because every state is in the same boat, right? Every state's having the same issues, asking the same questions, and we're all trying to figure it out at the same time. The other thing is to maintain as much flexibility as possible. And the third is, as much as possible, use our office to vet ideas, programs, plans, etc. At the end of the day, we can't force a parish to, partner with someone to do some of the technical assistance or to work with them to come up with a solution, which is great and fine. But as much as we can get a sense of what's happening in those communities, so we can add our 2 cents or provide our thoughts or to make any relevant connections, then we will do so. When it comes to the timeline of the grant program, the $180 million, we expect to get the rules around the $180 million by the end of June, if not sooner. So over the next couple of weeks from Treasury. I think then we have 60 days to formally apply for that money. And then what we're looking at is a September, closer to early to mid-September timeframe for this initial rollout for the grant program, with submission deadlines being in November, with then awards being made in December, with then construction beginning in January. So we've got a very accelerated timeline. What I've mentioned to the governor and what I've mentioned to the governor's staff is I'm starting to make the pivot to constructing the guidelines and the criteria for the grant program. And so my goal is to get a first draft of that completed over the next couple of weeks, if not by the end of June, so that I can share it with all of you guys to get your feedback, thoughts as we start to roll it out. So very compressed, quick timeline, and happy to answer any questions. If not, want to make sure we check and see that we have the chair. Keith, we have the interim chair. Or Mayor Perkins.
Hey, Vineet, give me 1 second. Let me confirm with the office that she got the new link.
Okay. With that, Leslie, did you want to just very quickly talk about the DRA, the speed test, and the partnerships that you guys have with GEO?
No, there's no quick conversation there. So we'll just wait until the appropriate time.
Okay. Any questions for me thus far? Comments, thoughts, directions? So everyone's happy with the way direction we're going, because it's a quiet crowd. Is everyone thrilled with the direction, or
If you have a question in the chat.
Sure. Laura, did you want to ask that question, or there's a question? So the question is from Laura Arvin, who is with the Delta Interfaith in organization in Lake Providence in East Carroll Parish. Her question was mentioning using public-private partnerships successfully in Baton Rouge, but the current legislation 648 this allows that. So I just got an email or a text message from Mayor Perkins. She has a new link, guessing she's running a little bit behind. We'll keep an eye out for her when jumping on. So just let me answer this question for Laura, and then maybe we'll pivot to Paul at that point. Paul Deming of GEO. But when it comes to HB 648, we're working on language that would allow for municipalities to participate in the grant making process as a potential local match without triggering any fair market act, right? Any language within the Fair Market Act. So we're working, as the governor said earlier, on some amendments that would allow for that to happen without it triggering the Fair Market Act. So Laura, what I would say is stay tuned. And then we're not making a requirement, but an option potentially for municipalities to do that. With that, Paul, I'm going to hand the conversation over to you. Maybe if you can spend 10, 15 minutes or however long you can until the interim chair says a few words, would appreciate it.
Beneath, thank you very much. Thank you, BEL Commission members, and Leslie. We really appreciate all that you've done for the DRA and the state of Louisiana. And we're very thankful for you allowing us to participate in the Louisiana Speed Test Initiative. And it's interesting that Commissioner Rosenworcel is going to participate this morning because we quote her on a regular basis where she states, "You don't manage problems you cannot measure." And that's what's exciting for us, sharing this technology with the state of Louisiana. I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction.
Hey Paul, can we?
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you on pause for a few minutes because I think we just got the interim chair to join. So
Excellent. Thank you.
So
Steve, can you introduce yourself and give her a little background on the committee, by the way, as well, before she jumps in?
Yeah. So interim chair, this is Vineet Iyengar. I'm the executive director for broadband and connectivity in Louisiana. It's a brand new office created really a couple of months ago to be the focal point and tip of the spear when it comes to addressing all issues around broadband for the state. Similar to every other state, our challenges are not anything unique. It has everything to do with access, affordability, and digital literacy, but we're coming up with very tactical solutions in partnership with the members of this commission, which is the Broadband for Everyone Louisiana Commission, which was created through an executive order by Governor John Bel Edwards in August of 19 to address the same very issues pre-pandemic now that we're having in a much more larger way. So one aspect of that Bell Commission was to create an office. An office was created. We're also creating a state broadband grant program using funds from the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund. So that's $180 million that's going through the state Senate currently today without problems thus far. We are also recipient, thanks to the FCC, of $342 million, or rather 13 providers as part of RDOF. So between RDOF, between our grant program, we'll have close to $500 million, if not more, focused on the access issue. We also pushed out a couple of weeks ago, and the governor pushed out, and all the folks on the Bell Commission aggressively pushed out the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. So thank you very much for that. And we look forward to understanding how we can leverage the Emergency Connectivity Fund that's going to be coming out in July 17th of this year from your office. So greatly appreciate the time. Mayor Perkins, thank you for facilitating the visit and for your work on the advisory committee. And I'll hand it over to the interim chair.
Oh, well, thank you for that description of everything you're doing, just proving that you're awfully well informed about what's happening in Washington. And the good things we can do to extend the reach of broadband in this country. I want to also thank Mayor Perkins for his office reaching out to me. It would be a treat to do this in person. Let's hope that those things are not too far off in the future. But I think that this group in Louisiana, the rest of the country, we've all realized that after this pandemic, broadband's no longer nice to have, it's need to have for everyone, everywhere. And if we're going to close the digital divide in this country, we're going to have to do it in two different ways. First, we're going to have to deploy infrastructure to those locations where there is none. And in that respect, I think we've got a little bit of an information deficit in the United States. We don't have particularly good maps that demonstrate exactly where service is with total precision. I think if we get better maps, we'll be smarter about where we send our funding dollars. And the other part of the digital divide that you referenced just a moment ago is affordability. The Pew Research Center did a study during this pandemic and found that 1 in 3 households worries about paying their broadband bill during the last year. Affordability is a real problem when it comes to the digital divide, when it comes to getting households to go online and stay online. And we also know it is now essential for so many jobs, for so much healthcare, and for so much of education. So I'm proud that the FCC has a new emergency broadband benefit program to help low-income households get online. We are open to other good ideas to solve both that deployment and affordability challenge. And I'm especially open to things that are being done at the state and local level, because I think for too long, Washington has thought that it's going to solve this problem on its own, when in the end, we really solve big problems like this by turning to people who know what's going on in their own backyard. And so that's why I wanted to join you today, but I could pontificate and go on and on because, it's what I've been doing a lot of lately in DC. But I'd rather be able to take your questions and figure out if there are things that we can help you with or ways we can work together.
Well, thank you. And we've got a great group of folks that are part of this commission. We have, cabinet secretaries, we have cabinet level commissioners of higher education. We've got folks from industry. We've got the co-ops representative. We've got nonprofit leaders. We've got for-profit. So it's really anyone and everyone that has a direct line to addressing the literacy gap, the affordability gap, and the accessibility gap for the state of Louisiana. So we're fortunate and blessed that we've got alignment across the board. Just before I hand it over to some of my colleagues on the phone, Interim Chair, one of the big challenges that I hear often in all of the parishes is technical assistance, right? There's 26 different federal programs. A good chunk of those are focused on access. A good chunk of those are focused on affordability, but very few focused on both the technical assistance and literacy side. And really for us, that technical assistance, upfront technical assistance is a huge, huge gap. The current money that they're getting from the America Rescue Plan allows for money to be spent on infrastructure, water, sewer, broadband, but really on infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, literacy, or affordability, but there's not any mention of technical assistance. So are there efforts in DC, whether it's the FCC or NTIA or others, to help with these guys address the technical assistance component, especially for folks that are first time wanting to get engaged actively in the parishes on broadband?
This is a really good point that you're bringing up. I want to be very candid with you and tell you that the digital literacy curriculum is not within the FCC's core competence. We spend most of our time thinking about fiber facilities and spectrum bands. We are sort of the engineering nerds of the communications world. But I think the point you make is absolutely true, that even when we create programs like the emergency broadband benefit, and even when we build infrastructure, there has to be a digital literacy component. And I'm fairly convinced that doing that at the national level has limitations. We got to figure out how to fund and work with local groups who know how to help and assist. And the more that Congress thinks about these issues, and if you read the news, you'll know that Congress is talking broadband like every third sentence right now. The more that I think in my conversations with members of Congress, we're gonna have to bring this up again and again, because sometimes just building it and sometimes even discounting it isn't enough. Figuring out how to get communities online is probably gonna take more work with digital literacy and more work with local nonprofits. And I can't tell you that I have that all figured out, but it is becoming clear to me that that's something we're going to have to talk some more to Congress about as they think about more broadband funding. It's a necessary piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to hand the conversation over to some of my colleagues who may or may not have a question. Yes, Wanda, and feel if you can, for the benefit of the chairwoman, just identify yourself, your organization, please. You may be on mute, Wanda.
Good morning, everyone. I got in the meet kind of late, I apologize. But I don't know whether anyone have mentioned sustainability. I'm concerned, I'm from East Care Parish. I'm a former teacher. And the problems that we have had with, good broadband in East Care Parish, we need help here in the northeastern part of the state. Sustainability is important because I've seen so many companies come and go. They'll pitch a good program, then drop us midway, and we are left holding the ball and the expenses. So I'm concerned about sustainability. I heard Mr. Vingard mention affordability and technical assistance. That's great, but I'd like to know, how are we gonna, once the infrastructure have been laid and the foundation's been established, how will we sustain this broadband system that we're trying so desperately to get in this parish?
This is a really good question. And I want to thank you for bringing this up. So I'm going to tell you how it ideally works, aware that it's something we're going to have to keep on working on. But ideally, the big capital costs that get the infrastructure built in the first place is the stuff you're going to see in new legislation that sends funds to the Department of Commerce, Department of Agriculture, the FCC. The stuff that leads people to actually put fiber in the ground and build it. But then the FCC has a program called the Universal Service Fund, which is what I would describe as recurring cost support. And that is the ticket to sustainability. So we got to figure out how to marry these funds for capital investment we're seeing right now with the recurring support for sustainability that comes from a fund known as the Universal Service Fund at the FCC. I think we have some policy work to do to figure out how those things work hand in glove, but it's designed to be the program that helps with the problem you described, which is once you build it, how do you keep it up and running and maintained? And that requires some subsidies and support too. Those subsidies are different in scope and scale than initial building costs, but they're very important so that that infrastructure continues to work and serve communities.
Thank you, Ms. Jessica.
Thank you for that question. We've got a couple more questions. Commissioner Reed, and then I'll go to Mayor Green after. So Commissioner Reed.
Sure. Good morning. Kim Hunter-Reid, Commissioner of Higher Education. Thank you so much for joining us. I have my Governor's Fellow.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Chanock. The New Orleans Public School District is expanding its mobile vaccine program. Starting today, the district says students 12 and older who want to get the vaccine can get the Pfizer shot with their parents' permission. Students 18 and older can choose the Johnson & Johnson vaccine instead. Superintendent Henderson Lewis says expanding the age range.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't have my television on. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. We oversee broadcasting, so you're just showing me what it's like in Louisiana.
There you go. Right. Dr. Susanna Craig is with me as well. She leads our Digital Inclusion Committee. So when COVID hit, we stood up a Digital Inclusion Committee for higher education statewide because we recognized that we needed more devices, more training, et cetera. So mine is more of a statement and sort of a continuation of your point about the training and the literacy. We certainly recognize as we think about moving beyond the pandemic that many of our college faculty and campus leadership see hybrid education as the wave of the future. And so we want to make sure that we are providing the most robust training for faculty while we're also moving to devices and access to affordable internet as basic as a book and a pen when you come to college. So we want to make sure that you're aware that we have a digital inclusion task force in higher education, if we could be a resource, but we also want to make sure as we're thinking beyond the pandemic and how do we evolve to a better system redesign as a result of the pandemic, that we have a robust literacy program to support faculty who now have moved into this space out of necessity, so we can capture that energy. And now is a moment for us to make sure that we do that.
That is so smart. You know, people, and by the way, this is not unique to the higher education. It's true with lower education too, where they say, well, okay, well, everyone's going back to the classroom. And the truth is, this time period has changed education. And what's good about what can be done online, gathering online, learning online, we're going to take some of that with us into the next. So we got to make sure that everyone can connect and is prepared and trained for that. It's not like we're reverting back to what it was before this pandemic. We're going to have some of these tools continue with us. So I think the point you made is a really, really important one. Thank you.
You.
Beneath, we can't hear you. Mayor Vadrine.
Yep. Mayor Vadrine. Go ahead.
Yeah, yes. Good morning, and thank you so much, Interim Chair, for your time. My concern is I'm the mayor of Ville Platte, Louisiana, and Ville Platte, Louisiana has the 5th slowest internet in the nation, not the state, in the nation. And my concern, and it pulls at my heartstrings, is that how can we be sure and ensure that small rural communities will get the assistance that they need and not fall into the cracks like we usually do when programs such as this that are so big, that goes everywhere all over the nation, and then it trickles down. And by the time the trickling is done, the small rural communities has fallen into through the cracks, and we don't get the services that we need, especially during COVID-19. It was a nightmare for kids to do homework, for people to work at home, for businesses to function. Even at City Hall, it was hard to function because of the slow internet access or lack thereof. And so I just want to be sure that we make sure that small rural communities are a priority. Not saying that we are more than the bigger cities, but I just want to be sure that we do not be left out.
Absolutely. Listen, when it comes to infrastructure priorities, I think that reaching communities that are unserved and underserved, like you described, is the priority. What we're going to need in the United States is higher broadband standards. Currently, our standards are 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up. I'm going to tell you that I think that's, I'm going to say that I don't believe that's ambitious enough. We should be thinking about much higher speeds, particularly download speeds. And I think we're going to need higher upload speeds too. But the reality is that when we choose that new benchmark, it's going to be the communities that are not at that benchmark, sounds like yours, that are going to be at the front of the line. And that's going to be, I think, the nation's standard for assessing where service support goes first. And in fact, you already see that in the Department of Commerce. They just started a new grant program. It's $288 million in grants for rural areas. And their standard for applications was at least 100 megabits downstream. There is a similar standard or scalable to that standard that was just released in a capital building fund from the Treasury Department that also is eligible for broadband. That's $10 billion. The bottom line is we're going to look at higher speeds, make that threshold, and the communities don't meet them are going to be first in line.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Just to piggyback off what the mayor said, as part of our grant program, we're actually incentivizing higher builds, specifically fiber. And it's really language that's mirroring the Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund, which is 100, 100. If you can't do that, 120. If you can't do that, but at minimum, 25, 3, if
Right.
not higher. And I think what the governor
So you're
mentioned-
already thinking on those terms, in other words, so that your work reflects what's being
Correct.
discussed in Washington. That's terrific.
Correct. I know we've got a couple of minutes left, and I think we have one more question. Luke Purdy, if you can, you have a question for the interim chair.
Sure. I'm Luke Purdy. I'm the Director of Educational Technology with the Louisiana Department of Education. I just want to encourage you to have the E-rate team take a look at the restrictions they have on content filtering and on remote access. As a technology director in a school system last year, I encountered, and I've heard from other technology directors, encountered a lot of hindrance with some of the rules on content filtering. They were established for very good reasons. However, the situation changed, and we were unable to assist in some situations because of the restrictions on E-rate funding.
Yeah, I've heard this from others as well. The one challenge that the FCC has with this issue is the Children's Internet Privacy Protection Act, which is legislation that amended Section 254 of the Communications Act, which is the E-rate section of the law. So Congress put those provisions in, and like you said, they're a little dated, maybe built for another time, maybe a pre-pandemic era. And they do represent, I know, a challenge for some districts working with E-rate funds. It's something that I hope we can work with Congress to update over time. But I'm going to be candid with you. It's always fraught to come in and say we need to update the child protection with the internet standards that you created. That can be a challenging discussion to have. Everyone might have different ideas about how to do it. But I'll tell you this, if you had a bunch of state E-rate coordinators who got together and characterized what wasn't working, that would probably be helpful, because we'd be in a better position to try to explain to Congress how this group that is dedicated to getting technology into students' hands for learning, is finding some unreasonable impediments in this law that might be a little bit dated. So if I could ask you to think about it that way, that might be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we've got 3 minutes left. Any sort of final comments, Chair?
Well, I just love your energy. Whenever I get a mayor or a state group that wants to reach out, I just feel like we should chat with you. We should stay in touch. I think I said at the start, I don't think all these things are just going to be solved in Washington. We're going to need local energy and effort. And one of the big initiatives the FCC is starting this year is a really comprehensive national map with broadband. And one of the things we're going to be doing is we're not just going to be asking carriers, where do you deploy, where do you not deploy? We're going to also turn around and ask our state and local officials to take a look at these maps. And I hope when we do, you'll be able to step into the fray, take a look and validate what's right, tell us what's wrong, because I think working together, we're going to be able to build the kind of data set we need to make sure that every community and every state has this infrastructure going forward.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the time. Mayor Perkins, thank you for facilitating this conversation. Again, you guys are doing yeoman's work, just like all the folks on this commission, to addressing singularly the biggest challenge that we have, especially in our rural parishes, and also in areas of unserved, which is the lack of broadband access, and access leads to affordability and utilization. So thank you all for participating. And I know before we let all of you guys go and wrap up, we have Paul Deming, again, from GEO Partners, who's doing a phenomenal job when it comes to working with us and our officials in terms of creating a mapping effort that's around sort of the crowdsourced MLab data. And so I know FCC interim chair, you've got UCLA, you've got your own speed test that you're doing that's crowdsourced, mobile-based. And so we've partnered with the Delta Regional Authority and with Leslie Durham to do a similar speed test done at the homes in partnership with GEO Partners. I know Paul had a nice demo that he wanted to share with you, but we'll set aside specific time for Paul to share the demo and the power of his platform and how all of you guys can be engaged in a subsequent meeting that we have of the BEL Commission, which will set in the next couple of weeks, if not sooner.
Sounds
so
good.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. Appreciate the time, and look forward to working with all of you and or seeing you on the road. Thanks and take care.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.